I don't want to make this video seem all negative for the Mets because there is some slightly good stuff coming out of this. But the Mets just picked up another feeble loss to have lost 15 games out of their last 22. Yes, I get that the Mets won a 4-game winning streak, and yes, I get that this game was going to be tough. But in some cases, it's not the fact that you lost, it's the way that you lost. And when you look at the way that the Mets lost, you'll tell they've lost a lot of momentum. The Yankees had a 5-0 lead and a 95.4% chance to win. When the Mets had bases loaded, nobody out, and were down 5-3, the Yankees' chance to win was cut to 52.3%. Senga immediately grounded into a double play, and there were some pretty impressive defensive plays by the Yankees that were not tough, that were not easy plays, that led to the Yankees putting the game away. So it was 5-4 for the sixth. Sac fly by Judge makes it 6-4. And the Mets just really cannot get any momentum going. Williams pitches a clean inning, and Fried gets the win. Zach Pop earns the loss. And can we just talk about how stupid it was to use Zach Pop? I mean, his ERA, 14.85 now. Like, they used Zach Pop, and of course he explodes. Waddell also doesn't pitch great. So the Mets pitchers really had a hard time today. And you didn't use Tidwell once. Like you look at the play-by-play, and you'll see that there were lots of opportunities for the Mets to make a comeback that they failed to capitalize on. Not to mention, in the fourth, like some of these, batted balls could have resulted in better outs. Like these two plays that were failed double play attempts. Granted, I get that in this case, the double play it still would have been 2-0. You could have played your infield in, though. You probably should have played your infield in, considering that you were losing as it was. And this one, you absolutely should have gone the double play off to end the inning. Instead, it became 3-0. I don't know why you didn't intentionally walk Aaron Judge in this spot. And of course, he hit a 388-foot blast. It's 3-0. You're losing 3-0. By walking Judge, you set up the double play. You set up the double play, and not only do you set up the double play, but now you make it where Judge can't homer and you have to face lesser players. Now, I get it. Stanton did fly out, and that probably would have been a sac fly to make it 4-0. Bellinger did wind up getting a double, but I didn't see a video of the double because it must have not been there when it happened. But looking at the kind of double it was from what I heard on the radio broadcast, it's the kind of double that could have easily held a slow runner like Judge at third. So it very well could have been 4-0. Who knows, maybe it's 5-0. If it was 4-0, it makes a bit of a difference in how the rest of the game goes. And I'll talk about why. In the bottom of the fifth, the Mets do make contact against Fried, load up the bases with no outs, or with one out. Lindor does cash in on a single, but Soto struck out. Alonso flied out to right, so it was 5-2. Then the sixth inning is really where the Mets momentum stops. They had bases loaded at 5-3, as Nimmo was hit by a pitch, and then Mauricio, Beatty, and McNeil all singled. Senga grounds into a double play. It did put a run on third, but it did put a tying run on third, but it also made it so that there were 2 outs. And of course, McNeil flied out to right. On what I will say, I don't know if there's a video of this, it was an impressive play by Aaron Judge, as he did make a diving catch. But still, it could have been different. Obviously, 5-5 if Judge doesn't make that play in a tie ball game. But Senga, on a first pitch, grounding into a double play really hurt the Mets there. If he had beaten it out, then honestly, chances are that fly out becomes a sacrifice fly with Judge having to make a dive and grab. And we see the game be 5-5. What makes this even worse is that if it was 4-0, as I said, and the game was 4-4, I doubt that they just settle for a grounding into a double play. Um, they probably aren't focused on that. That was basically saying that they'll concede a run for 2 outs, which usually you do. But if it's a matter of the tying run, or not, then matter of the tying run, then they very well might have played for the force out at home plate. Since you're obviously fine conceding a run in that spot, considering that you could either have 1 out and it be 5-3 with bases loaded, or you could have 2 outs, runner on third, 5-4. Those are your two choices. I get that there is the 2-3 double play where it's 5-3 and you have runners on second and third. That's the worst kind of double play if it ends in 2-3. But 6-2-3 double plays are much more rare than 6-4-3 double plays. They're much harder to turn. It could very well be a 6-2, and then Senga could have beaten that out. And if that happens on Marte's fly out to right, that's a sac fly. Now it's and that would tie up the game for the Mets. Not to mention, actually, well, tough to say for sure. And obviously, when Soto lined into that double play that the Mets challenged and were unsuccessful at, and we'll get to that in a second. Obviously, though, you have to think about like how that could have been different if it was like a bases loaded situation if Lindor got hit by a pitch. Brazoban came in. He had an early implosion with 2 singles. I don't get how an infield single allows a runner to go first, third. Maybe because the Mets are idiots and they thought it was a foul ball and it wasn't. Judge hits a long sacrifice fly to left. I get here not intentionally walking him, since even though there is a free base, it's not first. So you are loading the bases with 0 outs. I get the idea of that. And to be fair, a sac fly being the only damage, it was 6-4. The Mets were still in this game. It wasn't like he hit a home run to make it 8-4 and put the Mets out of the game. But that was that. And then we really, really had to talk about whatever happened here, because this is just purely unacceptable. What's the play? And the Mets challenged it, and the call was upheld. Lindor got caught on a base paths and gave the Yankees a free out, seeing as otherwise there'll be a runner on first and 1 out, which, while not ideal for the Mets, with the walk by Alonso, chances are Nimmo's fielder's choice does turn into a double play, so it doesn't matter in the long run. But it's impossible to tell. It's also tough to see if it was a catch or a trap. But the umpires made far more worse calls that benefited the Yankees, both in this game and in the series. After that, another free double play is Mauricio. I don't know what happens to him as Beatty grounds out. You've gotta be hustling out of the box there. And the Mets get nothing going. 1-2-3 inning in the bottom of the 9th for them. You see the umpires call this a ball, which I guess doesn't make a huge difference since he got out anyway, but this was called a ball by the umpires. And before anyone says that, look at Judge and his strikeout looking, all these pitchers are balls. Look at Luis Torrens's at bat. Wait. Why is ESPN saying that these are all strikes? Every other strike zone said that at least 2 of them were balls, but... oh well. Mendoza got ejected, so that was not great. And then the game ends because Lindor goes chasing on a strikeout, swinging at balls that maybe ESPN says are outside the zone, but really weren't. And this is just a game that the Mets cannot afford to have. I get that the Orioles are a trash team, but the Mets have to play them in Baltimore. The Orioles just went on the road and they swept the Atlanta Braves. They went on the road and they swept the Atlanta Braves. The Orioles have been looking like a decent team recently. Yeah, they lost 2 out of 3 to the Rangers, but they took 2 out of 3 from the Tampa Bay Rays. And now the Mets have to come to Baltimore and play them. They're still 1.5 games back of the Phillies for the NL East lead, which is looking more and more like a fever dream every single day. The 1 seed is pretty much out of the question because then you got to realize that the Phillies themselves are 3 games back of the Dodgers, so the Mets are 4.5 games back of the Dodgers. This tailspin by the Mets, it's becoming problematic. That being said, it's not all bad news for the Mets today, as I, sort of hinted at. The Mets do have 3 All-Stars. You've got to be kidding me. Why is Twitter doing this? You have Lindor, Alonso, Diaz. Lindor, we already knew about, was a starter. Diaz is a pitcher, probably closer for the All-Star game. And Pete Alonso was the reserve first baseman. You look at their stats, and it's tough to tell about Lindor, and we'll get to that. He probably didn't really deserve a starting role. Pete Alonso has looked pretty good recently. Even though this didn't update against the most recent game where Pete Alonso did not play well. So his batting average went from 290 to 287. His OPS went from 929 to 923. But still, he's putting up pretty good numbers. He has an OPS in the 900s, and it may not be the same monster numbers that we saw from Alonso when he won Player of the Month in April and when he was on track to be MVP. I doubt he comes anywhere close to MVP, but he is still putting up good numbers. May was the only month where Alonso really struggled, seeing as he was actually pretty good for the Mets in June, even when the team was not. And we're seeing he has a good average. He's also hitting for power. So we're seeing that. Lindor, on the other hand, is not really as deserving when you look at some of his numbers. His OPS is only 785 after the most recent game, with a 261 average. Before that, it was 261, 786, so his OPS went down, but his batting average stayed the same. You look at some of these numbers that Lindor putting up, they just aren't great, 261 average ties him for 75th place, 785 OPS ties him for 64th, 17 home runs ties him for 25th, 49 RBI ties him for 50th. As much as we were bashing people, the MLB and whatnot for not having Lindor as an All-Star game last year and just putting up good numbers because of better name recognition by other players, Lindor has the name recognition. That's the only reason why he came in. His numbers are really just mediocre. And his June was terrible when he almost was at the Mendoza line, 628 OPS. He had a good April for once, and a decent May, but he just collapsed in June and was a huge reason why the Mets themselves had major troubles in June. Like, Lindor just has not been playing that well recently. And Pete Alonso, on the other hand, his average puts him, ties him for 24th place. Home runs at 20 ties him at 12. His 73 RBI ties him at 3rd in National League. His 923 OPS puts him at 8th place. Then you have Edwin Diaz. Edwin Diaz is also very deserving. I get that he didn't really pitch that much as the Mets were struggling, but you cannot blame Edwin Diaz for that. His 18 saves ties him for 8th. That's partially because he didn't have a crazy amount of opportunities. 53 strikeouts. That does only tie for 138. He has a 1.8 ERA and a .91 WHIP. He may not have the qualified amount of innings yet, which is partially an indictment on the Mets. He's only pitched 35 total innings, despite the Mets being what like 90 games into the season. I think they're 91. But that's not really on Edwin Diaz. In June, he pitched to a 1.08 ERA in June. Has not allowed an earned run in July. Did not allow an earned run in May. He did have a 4.91 ERA in April. We will get to that. But the thing with Edwin Diaz in June, he just didn't pitch that much, especially when the Mets were struggling. Because think as to when Diaz comes on. Usually, Diaz comes on for a save situation. Like, you look at the Mets and their opportunities, like, they brought him on, tie game, bottom of the ninth, against the Braves on the 17th. He did his job. He did not allow anyone to reach base. But the Mets wound up losing in extra innings, so he could not earn the win. Against the Braves, they used him top of the ninth, where he allows 2 hits but gets out of the inning unscathed, but the Mets can't make a comeback in the bottom of the ninth. So he was in line for the win. 26th, it's not a safe situation since there was 4 runs, but they use him. He did get a save on the 25th against the Braves. So again, he just hasn't had that many opportunities to come on and play, seeing as in a lot of the games, the Mets were losing in a blowout. So they couldn't use him. I don't know why the Mets burned him in a 6-run game, but he didn't allow an earned run. Diaz has had 19 save opportunities. He only blew 1 of them against the Dodgers on June 2nd, and even when he did, he still wound up earning the win anyway. He did have a very close call in the 9th inning of that game, where obviously runners on first and third with 1 out. Ohtani had a sacrifice fly that actually was this close to being a home run. That would have been a walk-off win for the Dodgers and would have been a loss for Edwin Diaz. But he holds on, gets Ohtani on a sacrifice fly, gets out Hernandez. Back-to-back RBIs for the Mets in the top of the 10th, puts them at a 4-2 lead, and the Mets do hold on and win 4-3. So Diaz does escape. He earns the win, despite not pitching well. He has a 3-0 record. I get one of them was on a blown save, but this win against the White Sox pitched a clean top of the ninth, and the Mets walked it off. And same for April 5th against the Blue Jays. And the main reason why his ERA, was so high at the start of the year was mainly because of 2 back-to-back games. April 9th, he pitches 2/3 of an inning, allows 3 runs on a 3-run homer against the Marlins in a 5-0 loss. But the Mets were down 2-0 anyway, so he was just playing for an opportunity at the win, and he blows up. Against the A's, pitches an inning, gets the save, but does allow 2 earned runs, as he nearly has a colossal meltdown. But thankfully, Diaz is able to hold on and avoid it. So Diaz was doing pretty good after that, but his ERA did shoot up when he allowed a home run as he pitched an inning for the save against the Philadelphia Phillies. He actually allowed a 3-run shot, but the other 2 were tied to Kranick. But since then, the only time his ERA ever ticked up was in that game against the Dodgers, where he got his only blown save of the year. And now his ERA is down to 1.8 as well. So again, Diaz had his struggles at the start of the year, but he's really been nails, ever since those 2 bad games he had in April. He's really, been nails ever since. He's only allowed 7 earned runs, which is pretty good. And 6 of them wound up coming in April anyway, so that's Edwin Diaz, as he made it. But the player who really got snubbed and didn't even make it as a reserve, Juan Soto. Partially because the start of the year, Soto just did not look good. But now that he's starting to heat up, and you know, I get that his numbers went down significantly after this game. He had a 267 average and a 915 OPS. That's going to go down after this game. And I get it partially because of his underwhelming numbers early on. He had a 701 OPS in April and a 792 OPS in May. So you look at where his numbers were, and you realize like his OPS was in the 700s on June 5th, and not only that, but there was a point in the year where his batting average was as low as 224. He had a 224 batting average pretty deep into the year on May 28th with a 745 OPS. Obviously, he's improved since then, but you look, he was in the 220s in that game against the Dodgers. But he's picked it up. His average only ties him for 68 at 263. 21 home runs ties him at 9. 51 RBI ties him at 34th. 904 OPS. It does put him at 10th place. So his numbers, I will admit, they aren't great, but he has the power. I get he's not clutch with runners in scoring position, but now his OPS is in the 900s. Like, for him to not even make it as a reserve is kind of a joke. He had a monster June. He was player of the month in June. Couldn't even make it to the All-Star game as a reserve, and that was mainly because Kyle Stowers had to make it.